Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Hey everyone, welcome back into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you're not subscribed to Touchdown Alabama on YouTube, be sure hit that subscribe button below so you can stay updated on all of our Alabama football recruiting news here at touchdowналabama.com. On today's episode of The Process, I do have to hit you guys with a couple of important recruiting updates, but I also get an opportunity to catch up with Earl Little Sr., who is the father of the Crimson Tide's 4-star defensive back target Earl Little Jr. out of American Heritage High School in Plantation, Florida. But before I get an opportunity to catch up with the former NFL defensive back, I do have to hit you guys with those recruiting updates. We are going to roll right into them here, starting with Antonio Kite, the 4-star athlete out of Anniston High School in Anniston, Alabama. He is a unique prospect because he has the opportunity to play both football and basketball at the University of Alabama. Actually got a basketball offer from the Tide before he got a football offer after playing 1 year of high school football at Anniston High School on last season. But I recently got an opportunity to catch up with him, talk a little bit about his A-Day visit because he was one of the prospects on the campus of the University of Alabama on April 17th, which was the day of the Crimson Tide's annual spring game. He talked a little bit about that experience, but he also talked about a couple of the other teams that are pushing for him in this recruitment at the moment. You guys can check out that full interview over at touchdowналabama.com. But now we are going to switch gears and take a look at a couple of new offers that the Crimson Tide extended recently. One of those offers went out to a 5-star running back in Ruben Owens out of El Campo High School in El Campo, Texas. A speedy running back who's actually verbally committed to Steve Sarkisian in the Texas Longhorns at the moment, but he is still keeping his recruitment open. When you look at the state of Texas, the Crimson Tide has been fortunately were able to go into the state of Texas over the last couple of recruiting cycles and pull in a couple of running backs. When you look at Kamar Wheaton and Jace McClellan, they could be looking to do the same down the line. When you look at Ruben Owens being verbally committed to Texas at the moment, he actually has a visit date set to the University of Alabama. He plans to visit campus on the first day the recruiting dead period is lifted, which is June 1st. So he will be on the campus of the University of Alabama pretty soon. So Ruben Owens is definitely a running back prospect to know moving forward in the future. But now we are going to also take a look at another guy who has an offer from the Crimson Tide. That is Maurice Clipper, a 3-star offensive lineman out of Georgia. His offer came from the Crimson Tide's running back coach Robert Gillespie, who really raved about this guy's size. We look at him as a prospect. He really fits the mold of what you are looking for at the offensive tackle position. Crimson Tide's coaching staff likes the way he moves at that size. He has racked up a lot of different offers since January. Actually has pulled in 21 offers in the year of 2021. So his recruitment is definitely on the rise. The Crimson Tide has thrown their hat in the ring for his services after landing a loaded offensive line class in the 2021 recruiting class. They will look to do the same in the 2022 recruiting cycle. Clipper is a prospect to know at the moment. He wants to make a decision before his senior season begins. He has some visit date sets for the summer, but he has no visit date set to visit the University of Alabama at the moment. Moving on to Terrence Brooks, a 4-star defensive back out of Texas who released a top 5 and included the Crimson Tide along with programs like Texas A&M, Florida, and also Oregon. When you look at Terrence Brooks, he looks to be one of the Crimson Tide's top cornerback targets in the 2022 recruiting class. He will officially visit the University of Alabama in June, and he is a prospect I think Alabama fans need to pay close attention to when it comes to this summer. We are also going to take a look at a 5-star offensive lineman in the 2023 recruiting class who the Tide offered and Caden Proctor. Proctor is projected to be one of the top overall offensive tackles in the 2023 recruiting class. He actually sent his tape to the University of Alabama's coaching staff. He was in contact with the Crimson Tide's defensive line coach, Freddie Roach, for a couple of weeks before the Crimson Tide officially offered him. That offer came from Nick Saban, the Crimson Tide's head football coach. He talked to me a little bit about getting that offer from Nick Saban. He also talked about the Crimson Tide's player development, which he seems to be a huge fan of. You can tell that he was really listening to his conversation with Nick Saban. He was able to quote some of the things that Saban said during that conversation, throwing out the Crimson Tide's NFL stats in terms of how many players the Crimson Tide currently have in the NFL at the moment. So Proctor is a prospect I think Alabama fans definitely need to know moving forward in the 2023 recruiting class. The Crimson Tide could host him for a visit this summer. He is still getting his plans together at the moment. But now we are going to dive into our conversation with Earl Little Sr., a former NFL defensive back who spent 9 years in the National Football League, played for a couple of different organizations, including the New Orleans Saints, the Green Bay Packers, and also the Cleveland Browns. He is also the father of the Crimson Tide's 2022 four-star defensive back target, Earl Little Jr., out of American Heritage School in Plantation, Florida. We are so happy to be joined by the former NFL defensive back. Thank you so much for joining us on the process. The first question I wanted to ask you was, how has the recruiting process changed in your opinion? Of course, you were recruited in the 90s, but your son is getting recruited in the social media age. What are some of the biggest changes that you have seen?
Well, that's the biggest issue, right? Not issue, but that's the biggest change, the social media, that a lot of these nowadays, they get to see the universities and see what they have going before even before going on a visit or unofficial visit or a visit, or the official visit. Because when I was coming up, I couldn't see what a university looked like, what their facilities looked like, or anything like that. I had to, take my actual visit. To see that type of stuff. And I think it's a great thing. I think social media is good, and you just have to be mature enough and to how to handle it, because it also can be a bad thing for you as well.
Yeah, I've seen both sides of that equation, the good and the bad, when it comes to social media in the recruiting process. But switching gears to Earl Little Jr.'s recruitment, of course, Alabama is one of his top schools. Where do you feel the Crimson Tide stand in his recruitment at the moment?
I think they're high on this board. I can't really give you like from 1 through 5. I really can't say, but I can tell you they're up there.
Yeah, and just switching gears and just going away from the recruitment process for a minute. In terms of his game, he is one of the Crimson Tide's top defensive back targets in the 2022 recruiting class. You putting on your coaching hat, also putting on your former NFL defensive back hat. What are some of the strengths and what are some of the things you think he brings to the game?
His football IQ. He's a very, very intelligent football player. And that also matches his athletic ability, because he's a guy, I think he's better than me at this age, but I've also gave him advice because I also played corner and safety, and I also played a nickel and a dime. And I told him that when he first got in high school, I said, as a freshman, I said, I learned every position in the secondary, because, he wanted to play safety, because, I was a safety, and all that. And he wanted to play safety, and I was like, no. I said, you can always go back and do that. I said, but master every position, the corner, the nickel, and the safety position. And that's exactly what he does. He plays outside on the island. He goes inside and plays the nickel, which they call a star nowadays, and he also plays some safety. So his attributes, that what he can bring to the game, he's I hate to just call him like a cornerback, but he's just categorize him as a defensive back. Yeah. He can play all 4 positions. He can play the corner, each corner. He can play the star. He can play both safety positions, free and strong safety. So that's the talent that he has, and I think that's his biggest attribute. His intelligence of the X's and O's, and he learns pretty fast, and his ability to play anywhere on the football field, and he's valuable. And I told him, I said, man, once you do that, you're going to be valuable. They can't take you off the field.
It's funny that you bring up value, because that is something Nick Saban preaches a lot. Players creating value for themselves, and I talked a lot about Earl Little Jr.'s versatility, which is something Alabama likes to see out of their defensive backs. But you also told me that you see a little bit of Minka Fitzpatrick in Earl Little Jr.'s game. Where does those comparisons come from?
They let us come in and watch the practice. He took a picture with Minka, and then I was watching somebody on Bleacher Report. They put Alabama 2016 defense, all their turnovers, and I was looking at it. I think it was on Twitter.
Okay.
And I was watching it, and I saw Minka had like 3 big plays in the side that highlight reel. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, man,
Yeah,
he reminds me of Earl.
Yeah.
And then when the coach, what's his coach Falau, the DB coach, the new cornerback, he called me one time. Well, I called him and I was talking to him like because he had text. He saw the highlight tape of Earl, and I told him. He was like, yeah, he come to school here. That's exactly what he's gonna be like, Minka, because he can do it all.
Thank you so much for joining us today, man, discussing Earl Little Jr.'s recruitment process, how he is working through it, also discussing what he brings to the table, and also taking a look at how the recruiting process has changed since you were a recruit. And that will wrap up this episode of The Process. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on The Process on Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page. And before you leave, be sure to go ahead, hit that subscribe button below, then head over to touchdowналabama.com. Pick up your subscription today. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles. Get your hands on our brand new yearly print magazine issue. In this issue, you get an opportunity to read about how Mac Jones went from an underrated quarterback prospect to one of the top overall prospects in this year's upcoming NFL draft. Then pull out your device. If you have an Android device, be sure to go to the Google Play Store to download the Touchdown Alabama app. If you have an Apple device, go to the Apple App Store to download the Touchdown Alabama app. With that app, breaking news notifications can be sent to your mobile device. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine.
Process.